Bookseller Crow, almost live.
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Indeed.
Welcome back to the Bookseller Crow.
Yay.
For our events. Yes, we had an event last night, and then I think we had one last. My memory's really bad, so sorry if I'm a bit.
If some of you attended any of those events, tell Karen about it.
Yes.
And
you can remind me what happened.
Recall.
Yes, so tonight we have the wonderful Travis Elborough, cultural historian and all-round lovely man. I've known you for many years now.
It is been a while, hasn't it? Yeah.
We met in Port Eliot Festival, I don't know how many years, 15, 14 years ago. And since then you have published a myriad of books, haven't you?
Afraid so. I just wanted to do the one and retire, but it didn't really work out like planned.
From the Route Master bus to LPs and also various really sort of other books of collections of diaries, travel, the what's the title of the
Atlas of Improbable Places.
Yes, and a walk through the park with Crystal Palace features in that.
Indeed.
So you've been a shop favourite.
Thank you.
For a very long time. So welcome, Travis.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming.
And here you are with your latest Through the Looking Glasses, the spectacular life of spectacles.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously quite weird for me as well, because this is the first in real life event I've done since March, or no, probably about February 2019. So 2020, yes, sorry, the before time. So it's lovely to see you, and nice to see you nicely distanced. Some of you are keeping a mask on, which is also great. We've got a swab of hand sanitizer over there if anyone feels the kind of urge to do that. No, I mean it's obviously, it's quite fascinating to try and write a book during lockdown, full start, but even more strange to try and do it while members of the government are testing their eyesight by driving to Britain with small children in tow. Probably I'm going to come out slightly, guarding myself, and switch. So, I mean, I've worn glasses since I was about 8 or 9. As I slightly explained in the book, I can't quite exactly remember when I first got glasses, and that's a sort of conundrum to me as well, because you think it would be this absolutely, the devastating moment when childhood ends or something, some psychic trauma. Or you're suddenly given these things. And I think partly the reason why I can't quite remember is because I was probably, like most people, a slightly reluctant glasses wearer. I put them on when I had to, snuck them away, put them back on, and so on, until I got to about my 20s, in which case I just had to keep them on all the time in order to see anything. But this thing about glasses, about that this is a still from Superman, whose alter ego is of course Clark Kent. And the thing about Clark Kent is that Clark Kent is bespectacled, whereas Superman, who does all the crime-solving stuff and all the adventurous flying around, Gotham, doesn't wear glasses. And there's a kind of whole argument really about whether, what this says about the kryptonite world, or that somehow or other. And actually, Superman, the 1979 movie, I remember it being taken to me for my birthday in Brighton, and it was very exciting. It was too. But and I can't remember that time whether I was wearing glasses or not. Possibly not. So I probably just enjoyed it on that kind of value. Interestingly, that movie is very much Clark Kent's movie. Superman arrives quite late in the narrative, but it's been this sort of prejudice against glasses, that glasses are you are weaker, you are lesser because you have glasses, kind of runs through in a way the history of glasses and spectacles and so on. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. But so my journey to writing the book about glasses really began a few years ago, where I had went for my normal eye test at Stephen Davis of Church Street, Stoke Newington, as my optician. They're still quite old school, and there's also a thing I write about in the book as well, that for a long time as well, opticians, in order to represent themselves as scientific, medical practices, kind of amped that stuff up a bit. And certainly as a child going to opticians, there was a sense, and at that point, until the deregulation in the 1980s, opticians, for example, couldn't advertise the prices of their products, couldn't advertise outside trade journals. So in a way, glasses wearing as a child was also associated in a way with, it had a similar feel of going to the dentist. It was oddly sterile spaces where stuff will be shined in your eyes and all the rest of it. So I got to my late 40s and I had my test for my eyes, and they sort of told me two things. One, which was that I really now needed varifocals. So I've always been myopic, I've been short-sighted throughout my life, but I was getting to that point, and some of you I'm sure have encountered this moment where, in my case, if you're short-sighted, you start taking your glasses off to read, and if you haven't worn glasses before, you're starting to do this thing of holding stuff further away from yourself. This is a condition called presbyopia. And presbyopia is that your lenses and your ability to accommodate your eyes weakens as you get older, and it's quite common and so on. So there was that. So I was going to have to fork out for varifocals, and they're quite expensive, or get two pairs. So I had a pair for my eyes and then a pair for reading, to do the on-off duality of glasses. I went to see there's a musician I'm a great fan of called Robin Hitchcock, who's in a band called the Soft Boys. He played a gig in Clerkenwell a few years ago, in the before times, obviously, and he had his set list on the floor, and he sort of was trying to read it. He handed it out and said, anyone under 50 can read this. That's kind of what sort of happens with it. But also, I was told that there was something odd at the back of my eye, so I was also sent for glaucoma tests. And this kind of opened up the thinking about my eyesight and thinking about my eyes. That in the end, actually, I've had a series of glaucoma tests, and they're still, as they were, keeping an eye on me. And the metaphors and puns just lend themselves, unfortunately, in a book like this. But it suddenly brought me up short. I was suddenly made aware of how much I depended on my eyesight and on my spectacles, and how vulnerable in a way I was with them. I'd slightly taken them for granted, and that in a way sent me off on exploring spectacles and glasses and how we got them. Because I mean, it's the Vision Council of America in 2020 calculated there are 8 million people in the world who wear glasses, and that's quite a lot of people. And one of the things that the profession is concerned about currently is that one of the things that's quite bad for increasing myopia is spending time indoors and staring at screens, and something that obviously in lockdown we've always been spending a lot of time doing. So there's a sort of feared for epidemic of myopia, which is possibly sort of coming along the tracks, which is of course terrible. But also, if you've got a book about spectacles, it's not necessarily a bad prospect. So I looked into kind of the history of glasses, and I've forgotten which slides I've got here. Anyway, so this is from Burgess Meredith, who played the Penguin in Batman, and this is for an episode of The Twilight Zone called Time Enough. And in it, he plays a myopic bank clerk who likes nothing more but to read, but his wife disapproves of his reading and so on. And then there's a nuclear event or some sort of apocalyptic thing, which basically destroys everyone. And he is because he's been down in the basement of the bank, in the vault. He remains the last man standing, so he's the only person alive. And so he goes to the library. There are all these books there. I'm spoiling this terribly for you. If you wanted to watch it, close your ears now. So he goes to the library, and the thing is called Time Enough, and basically he has the freedom and the liberty now to read at his leisure, and he sits down and his glasses fall off and smash on the floor. And for me, again, that's that sort of haunting thing of being left without these optical aids was terrifying me. That's the thing. But I mean, in some respects, like myself, like my own kind of memory about how old glasses, when I first got them. I mean, I know exactly the type of glasses I got. I got the standard. The number is NHS number 524. It's specifically the actual title for it, but it's the classic square National Health glasses issued with a kind of tin case, spring loaded. One was fearsome and would take your fingers off, and it really made getting your glasses out feel like you were sort of extracting oysters from a shell. And at school there would be, everyone would have those who had glasses, like they'd be on the desk next to the pencil cases, like sort of little clams across the. So those are the first glasses I had, but again, the date exactly is hazy. And similarly, actually, the story of glasses, the origins of glasses, we still don't know who was the person or persons that first invented glasses. So I know this has been a bit of a dash through, but when we will carry on talking about stuff, and obviously you're all welcome to ask questions and so on. But what I've realised is in this point, after having done all these books, is that what I normally do is this really thorough talk about the subject my book is about, and then realise that no one buys the book afterwards because they realise they've kind of learnt everything. So I'm hopefully teasing you by kind of giving you an overview-ish, but not everything, as it were. Okay, so I think this lasts about 4 minutes 50, I think. So about me. Or I did when I did it, David. We may be faster today. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Agatha Christie's much-loved spinster sleuth, Jane Marple, has a complicated relationship with optical aids, and one muddled by film and television adaptations, where reading glasses, along with half-knitted scarves and needles, are often fished out of capacious handbags as metonymic props for the character, the Marple equivalent of the Holmesian pipe and magnifying glass. Mm-hmm. On television, Joan Hickson, Geraldine McEwen and Julia Mackenzie have all, at times, peered imperiously at assorted dim policemen, puffed-up retired colonels, flighty actresses, bearded painters, snooty dowagers, young newlyweds, absent-minded professors, weedy clerks, nosy cooks and slatternly maids, through or over the top of spectacles of varying styles. Hickson in Half Moons, most memorably. In the books, however, glasses are less of a given. The first full Miss Marple novel, The Murder at the Vicarage, was published in Collins' New Crime Club imprint in 1930, which Christie would furnish with at least 2 books a year for the next 20 years. The pace of this output invariably resulted in some minor inconsistencies in the character across the 12 novels and 20 short stories she graced, some of them ocular. Especially since Christie alternated between Marple books and those featuring Hercule Poirot, the fastidious Belgian detective with whom she had made her name back in 1922, along with writing plays and other stand-alone mysteries and stories. Described as a white-haired old lady with a gentle, appealing manner, Marple is, according to the Reverend Leonard Clement, the narrator of that first novel, and whose vicarage provides the setting for the slaughter, someone who always sees everything. In this opening book-length case, we, of course, only see Marple through his eyes. That device, a classic Christie act of misdirection. One that initially obscures the fact that Marple really does have the clearest view of all, since her twinkly blue eyes look at the case from an entirely different angle to everyone else. Our unworldly ecclesiastical storyteller included. Here, however, the only glasses this maiden lady detective is credited with owning are the powerful ones that she deploys in her habit of observing birds. Mm-hmm. Though the vicars suspect that this hobby, like gardening, is merely a smokescreen that allows her to keep an eye on the villagers themselves. Christie had just turned 40 when Murder at the Vicarage was published, and possibly did not yet need to wear glasses herself, and so didn't think to equip her more elderly spinster with them either. While Christie's fictions continued to be located in a world of swish country houses, high-end resorts and quaint villages, peopled by the loaded, leisured and retired, and probably even by the 1930s was becoming as fantastical as Lord of the Rings, they did nevertheless move with the times. Christie, if eternally old, does age a bit here and there. She's with it enough to be wearing, so those marbles, I say Christie there. Marple, if eternally old, does age a bit here and there, sorry. Suggestion of the internal monologue, isn't it? It's terrible. She's with it enough to be wearing plimsolls in 1964's A Caribbean Mystery. And in the following year, at Bertram's Hotel, she's even revealed to be around 73 or 74 years of age. This 1965 offering from Christie, and the penultimate Marple novel, professedly set in a present-day 1960s London with its post office tower and Carnaby Street boutiques, involves the sleuth returning to a hotel she visited as a 14-year-old girl, nearly 60 years earlier. All of which, if true, and the truth is pretty meaningless when considering a fictional character, would technically have made Marple 38 or 39 back in 1930, and therefore roughly the same age as Christie. More importantly, for our purposes, Marple is also said to have had remarkable eyesight for her eyes. Only 3 years earlier, however, in The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, the rather more sickly spinster's eyes and her glasses were supposedly giving her trouble. Christie, taking a bit of a swipe at the optical profession, stated that even her new spectacles didn't seem to do any good. And that, she reflected, was because obviously there came a time when oculists, in spite of their luxurious waiting rooms, the up-to-date instructions, the bright lights they flash into your eyes, and the very high fees they charge, couldn't do anything more for you. Miss Marple reflected with nostalgia on how good her eyesight had been a few years ago. Perhaps those pricey oculists came to her rescue after all, and they were responsible for the massive improvement in her eyesight that followed. Or the intervening book spent solving a murder under the sun in a high-end Trinidadian hotel worked its magic in more ways than one. Who knows? The mystery of Marple and her spectacles remains a case awaiting a suitably talented amateur to solve.
Fantastic. Thank you, Travis.
That's right.
There's so much in this book, but I don't know how long it took you to write. Probably 100 years. I through lockdown. But yes,
Yeah.
I mean it's just it moved.
It was about 3 years. It was about 3 years since I first had the idea for it. But yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, so you wrote. Did you write? So 3 years in total of writing, but also in lockdown as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's a particular part of it that I thought was. Well, there's certain sections which is different to your other books because you've included sort of slices of memoir, which I thought was. I wanted more of, which is just but beautiful because I think that shows a certain, whether it's maturity or just, I don't know whether you're relaxed into the books a little bit more or whether it was just because it was started with a personal.
I think it was probably the latter to some extent, that I felt that it just seemed appropriate sometimes, I think, just to go off on a bit of a... So there is a... I mean, I kind of did it for you at the beginning, really, but there's a bit of... So I'm talking about national health classes, and then I just go off on a bit about the cases and school and so on. Just because I think it seemed... I suppose you were trying to give something that's a bit of a more a universal experience, or at least...
But I thought it was more to do with your parents, with the photograph of your parents, and how... people have taken off their glasses for certain occasions, and how, obviously it's, and I think there's that whole sort of removal and putting back on that's also charted through here, and what that means.
Yeah. So my parents' marriage, it was my parents' 50th wedding anniversary about 4 years ago, and their wedding photograph is a picture of my parents, on their wedding day. But my dad, who's a glasses wearer, is not wearing his glasses in the picture. And finally, after these, I just said, "Well, why is he not wearing his glasses?" And my mother said, "Well, I think we thought he looked better without them." And it's like, well, for the next 50 years of your marriage, he's had them on. So I mean, as a man, he's been looking not at his best for the last 50 years. It was a kind of interesting anomaly in that way. But you're right. This idea of taking. I mean, also there's something kind of ritualistic of taking the glass. People, there's like news readers, for example, when they have a kind of suddenly they're handed the bulletin and they put the glasses on, and it's given this sagacity in a way. It's given this extra thing, and the parody of that is things like the two Ronnies, where they're mocking the seriousness of the news by they're both wearing their heavy glasses while reading these news things. And I kind of say that my wife and I both wear glasses. Everybody does wear contact lenses, but basically our nightstand looks like the title sequence for the two Ronnies at night. This is two pairs of glasses kind of propped up on the side of it. So I tap that to sleep. You don't necessarily need to. Can have a.
That's it.
Oh well. Something else now.
Well, there we are. That's our.
We're in the desert now.
We're between Albuquerque and Santa Fe.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
So we have it in the world.
They can find you a book for your girlfriend, your husband, your girl or your boy. And if you've got a need for an uplifting read, Justine and Jonathan can pick out a book you'll enjoy. What a book at the Bookseller Crow on the hill. What a book, what a book at the Bookseller Crow on the hill. Crystal Palace Hill, that is. But you can order online.